For months, a summit had been planned. Not a casual gathering, not a routine check-in. A deliberate, carefully constructed meeting designed to settle something the family had been avoiding for years. The location was chosen with care. Windsor. Not Buckingham Palace, which would have made it feel like state business. Not Clarence House, which would have made it feel like Charles's turf. Windsor was meant to feel different, warmer, more intimate, more like family. And that choice was not innocent, because when this family wants something to feel less like an institution and more like blood, they reach for Windsor. It is where they go when they want you to lower your guard. And that was the entire point. The guest list was framed as a family conversation, senior royals, a few trusted advisors, the kind of gathering where things get talked through informally, person to person, before anything is ever formalized on paper. But there was one name that was never mentioned, one person who was not on the list William had been given, one person who was added quietly, late, and never disclosed. Camilla's private solicitor, not a palace legal advisor, not a neutral party, but the specific individual whose entire job is to protect Camilla's private interests. And the moment William walked into that room and saw her standing by the window, he understood everything. In less than 60 seconds, the months of planning collapsed. The summit was over before it had even begun. But to understand why that moment carried such weight, you have to understand what a summit actually means in this family. A summit is not a casual chat. It is not a regular family dinner. It is a rare, deliberate, heavily planned event, the kind you only convene when something genuinely needs to be resolved, when all the normal channels have failed completely. We saw the template for this back in January 2020 with the Sandringham Summit. When Harry and Meghan dropped their bombshell, the family was forced into a room. Charles, William, Harry, and the late Queen, hammering out the terms of an exit face to face. That was a real summit. High stakes. High tension. High consequence. So when word started circulating that a Windsor Summit was being arranged, everyone who understands this family understood the signal immediately. Something huge was being decided. And the subject this time was the future. Specifically, what happens to the shape of the family once Charles's reign eventually ends. The backdrop to all of this is something that cannot be ignored. Charles was diagnosed with cancer in early 2024. That diagnosis changed everything. Suddenly, questions that everyone had been comfortable leaving vague, questions about the future, about who controls what, about where certain people stand once the reign changes hands, those questions stopped being theoretical. They acquired a clock. Nothing focuses a family with a lot to lose like a clock they cannot stop. And that is the pressure this summit was born out of. Not a crisis blaring in the headlines, but a quieter, deeper one. The sense that the window to settle certain things was starting to close. Think about why they chose Windsor specifically. Because even the location was a choice loaded with meaning. This family has several stages it can use, and each one says something completely different. A meeting at Buckingham Palace is state business, formal, institutional, very much on the record. A meeting at Clarence House is Charles's own turf, the king's home ground, but Windsor is the old beating heart of the family. The place soaked in generations of private history, the setting they reach for when they want something to feel less like government and more like blood. Choosing Windsor was choosing intimacy. It was a way of saying this is family, not institution. Come as a son, not as a rival. And that framing, as we shall see, was not innocent at all. Because the more a room is dressed up to feel like family, the lower your guard naturally drops. And a lowered guard was the entire point. The summit was arranged after months of planning, a specific date at Windsor, a very carefully considered guest list, and this is where the story truly begins, because the guest list was practically the whole story. And almost nobody ever looks closely at a guest list. It was framed as a family conversation, senior family members, a couple of trusted household advisors, the kind of gathering where things get talked through informally, off the record, person to person. That framing matters enormously, because it tells everyone how to behave the second they walk in. A family conversation is loose. It is off the record. Nobody is guarded. You say things you would never put in writing because it is family, and family talk stays in the family. That was the exact atmosphere the summit was designed to create. Warm, informal, trusting. But here is a detail worth holding on to because it becomes critically important later. William had been given a version of the guest list in advance, the way you always are before something of this magnitude, and that lawyer's name was not on it. She had been added quietly, late, or simply never listed at all, which means the entire plan actively depended on William not knowing she would be there until he was already physically in the room. Think about what that tells you. If her presence was completely innocent, if she was there for some ordinary above-board reason, you would put her on the list. You disclose the harmless things. You only hide the things that only work if the other person does not see them coming. The very fact that she was kept off the list is the fingerprint of intent. Somebody understood perfectly well that if William knew a private lawyer would be present, he would never walk in, so they made sure he would not know until it was too late to matter. Except it was not too late, because he saw her before he sat down. William walks in and sees someone standing near the window who did not belong in a family conversation at all. Camilla's private solicitor. And I need you to understand why that single detail changed everything in a heartbeat, because this is the hinge the whole story turns on. There is an enormous difference between a family conversation and a legal proceeding, and the thing that separates them is exactly this: the presence of a lawyer. The moment a private solicitor is standing in the room, it is no longer a chat. It is a negotiation. Anything said becomes something that can be recorded, witnessed, and referred back to later. An informal nod of agreement stops being a warm family gesture and becomes something a lawyer can later describe as consent. William looked at that woman by the window and understood instantly that he had been invited into a room disguised as one thing in order to produce another. I want you to really feel the speed of that recognition, because it is probably the most impressive thing in the whole story, and it was over in a heartbeat. Most people walking into a warm room full of family would have registered the unfamiliar face and thought nothing of it. An aide, someone's assistant, a new advisor, who knows? Most people extend the benefit of the doubt, because that is what warmth is specifically designed to make you do. William did the opposite. In a single glance, he saw a face he could place, Camilla's own solicitor, not the palace's, and his mind did the whole calculation instantly. Her lawyer here, at a family meeting, not on the list, standing quietly to the side. Every one of those facts is individually explainable, but stacked together, they spell one word, and the word is negotiation. He did not need anyone to tell him. He did not need to hear the agenda. The presence of that specific person in that specific role, unannounced, was the agenda. He read the entire summit off one face before he had taken 3 steps into the room. That is a man who has been burned enough times to have developed a genuine sixth sense for the shape of a trap. And it tells you how these two sides now see each other. Because for William to read the worst intention off a single glance, the trust has to be completely and totally gone. He did not wonder if there was an innocent explanation. He did not give it a beat. His instant assumption was that he was being played, and the fact that he was right is almost beside the point. What it shows is a relationship so hollowed out that a lawyer's presence reads not as a possibility to be checked, but as a confirmed ambush on sight. That is not a family with tensions. That is a family where one side now assumes the other is always quietly working an angle, and once you assume that, every room becomes a room to be read for traps. William has arrived at a place where he cannot walk into his own family's gathering without scanning it like a chessboard. Whatever else you think of him, that is a lonely way to have to live. So that is the answer to the question the headline leaves hanging. Why cancel? Why not just sit down and see what happens? Because William grasped something most people would have missed in the moment. The trap was not in what would be said around the table. The trap was the room itself. If he sat down, if he engaged, if he let the family conversation proceed with that lawyer quietly present, then whatever came out of it, any softening, any apparent agreement, any moment where he seemed to go along with something just to keep the peace, could later be framed as his consent. Witnessed by counsel. The only way to defeat a trap built out of a room is to refuse the room entirely. So he did. He did not debate. He did not demand explanations in front of everyone. He simply said the meeting would not be going ahead, and he left. And in doing so, he took away the one thing the entire exercise depended on, him in a chair, on the record. Now, before we get to what that lawyer was actually there to produce, because that is the real payoff, let me connect this to a broader pattern. A lot of you are going to feel the echo from other stories we have covered. Stories where the presence of lawyers in a family room turned a warm assumption into a cold reckoning. How this family's real battles are not fought with arguments, they are fought with paperwork. And the person who controls the documents controls the outcome. Here it is again, and this time, William had clearly learned the lesson. Because a man who has watched what a single quiet legal instrument can do does not walk casually into a room where a private lawyer is waiting. He had seen how this works. And he was not going to be the one caught on the wrong side of the folder this time. So, what was the summit actually for? What was that lawyer there to produce? This is where I have to be honest with you about what is known and what is read between the lines. Nobody has published the documents. The palace has said absolutely nothing on the record about what was on the table that day. What follows is assembled from accounts of who was involved and what the summit was reaching toward. Take the specifics as the shape of the thing, not a perfect photograph of it. But watch what the summit was structured to do, because the structure gives away the intent. The summit's real purpose, by those accounts, was continuity. And I keep coming back to that word because it is the same beautiful, soft word that keeps appearing in these stories. Continuity. A word that means keeping things the same, which sounds gentle and responsible, until you ask, the same for whom? Because what continuity meant here, in practice, was securing Camilla's position, her arrangements, her standing, a whole set of understandings about property and role and influence beyond the end of Charles's reign. Making the temporary permanent, locking in while Charles was still king and still able to lend his authority to it. A structure that would carry Camilla's place forward into a reign where William, not Charles, would hold the power. And the reason it had to be a summit and not a letter and not a formal legal filing is the clever part. Because a formal legal move would require William's explicit, documented sign-off, and everyone knew he would refuse it the way he had refused these moves before. But a family summit, warm and informal, with a lawyer quietly present to witness and record, that could manufacture something much softer and much harder to undo. The appearance of agreement, consensus in the room. A witness who sensed that the family had talked it through and William had gone along with it. You cannot get a signature out of a man who will not sign, but you might, in the right room, get something a lawyer can later call a consent. That was the game. And William saw the board the instant he saw the player. I want to slow down on what that document or that understanding was actually reaching for, because the specifics tell you why it had to be done this way, rather than out in the open. By these accounts, the continuity arrangement bundled together several things that Camilla's side wanted, made durable past the reign. Certainty over which residences and private comforts she would retain as a widow. A defined and protected role, rather than a quiet fading into the background, and this is the part that would have set off every alarm in William's head. Some measure of ongoing involvement or influence in family matters after Charles was gone. Now, think about each of those from William's side. A future king cannot have the previous king's widow holding a locked-in, pre-agreed claim on residences and roles that he is supposed to control. That is not continuity. That is a mortgage on his own reign, taken out before it has even begun, by the one person he would never have chosen to grant it to. And the only time you can secure something like that is now. While Charles is alive, while Charles is king, while Charles's authority can still be used to bless it and make refusing it look like a son being cruel to a dying father's wish. The clock was not just pressure. The clock was the whole strategy. Get it locked in before the power changes hands. Because once it changes hands, the answer is no forever, and that reframes the warmth of the room. Because now every soft, familial detail of that summit reads completely differently. The intimate Windsor setting, the family conversation framing, the informal atmosphere, none of it was hospitality. It was all engineering, all designed to lower William's guard to the exact point where he might, in the flow of a warm afternoon with his ailing father, murmur something accommodating that a lawyer by the window could later write down as the moment he agreed. The kindness of the room was the weapon. That is the part that is almost chilling once you see it. They did not build a hostile environment to corner him. They built the most disarming environment they could. Because disarming was precisely what they needed him to be. And here is the double motivation, because I do not want to flatten this into villains and heroes. Honestly, this one is genuinely tragic on every side. Start with Camilla. Because her fear is real, and it is deeply human. When Charles dies, Camilla's situation changes overnight, and not in her favor. She becomes, in effect, a dowager, a widow of a former king, holding her title but losing the entire structure of support and standing that existed only because her husband was on the throne, the homes, the influence, the automatic place at the center of things. Almost all of it flows from Charles being king, and the day that ends, so does most of it. Her whole future in that new world depends on the goodwill of a man who has never been close to her and has every reason not to be generous. Imagine living with that. Imagine knowing that the moment you lose your husband, you also lose your protection, and that the person who then holds your fate is your stepson, across a coldness 20 years deep. Of course she wanted to lock things in while she still could. Of course her people pushed for a summit. Fear like that does not make you a villain. It makes you someone trying desperately to build a wall before the storm you can see coming. I want to spell out the mechanics of that fear, because I think people underestimate just how sharp the drop is for a queen consort who becomes a widow. Right now, Camilla is at the absolute center of the institution, the residences, the staff, the state occasions, the standing, but almost none of that is hers in her own right. It is borrowed. It exists because she is the wife of the reigning king, and it is lent to her, in effect, by his position. The day Charles dies, that loan is called in. She keeps a title. She keeps whatever personal wealth is genuinely her own. But the vast machinery of being at the center, that flows to the new king and the new queen. To William and Catherine, that moves overnight. And Camilla moves from the heart of the family to its edge. That is a brutal transition for anyone. And she has watched up close how this family treats the people who drift to its edge. She has seen what happened to others who lost their central place, so her instinct to secure something permanent is not greed. It is a woman looking at the cliff she knows is coming and trying, while she still has any leverage at all, to build something to hold on to on the way down. There is an extra cruelty in the timing that I think genuinely tormented her. Her leverage only exists while Charles is alive and well enough to lend his weight to her cause. Every day, his health is a question. Her window narrows. So she is not just afraid of the future, she is afraid of the clock, watching the one source of her protection slowly weaken, knowing that the moment he is gone, so is her ability to arrange anything at all. That is an awful thing to carry. It would make almost anyone reach for a lawyer in a room. It just happened to be the exact reach that a man like William was always going to catch. And Charles wanted to give her that wall. Put yourself in his position too. Here is a man facing his own mortality with real clarity now, who spent decades fighting to be with this woman, who watched her absorb years of public hatred at his side. And the thing he wants more than almost anything, in whatever time he has left, is to know she will be safe when he is gone, that she will not be cast out, diminished, left to the mercy of a court that never fully accepted her. That is not a scheme. That is a husband trying to protect his wife from a future he will not be there to soften. And so, by these accounts, he lent his weight to the summit, not as a plot against his son, but as a father and husband trying to solve an impossible equation. How do I protect her when the only person with the power to protect her after me is the one person least inclined to? And then there is William. And here is where the Diana of it all comes in, because you cannot understand his reflex without it. William has spent his whole adult life watching this institution try to manage, arrange, and quietly engineer outcomes behind soft words and closed doors. And he has never ever trusted it. Because the last time this family arranged things quietly behind the scenes, managing a situation to protect the institution's comfort, the person on the wrong end of it was his mother. He was 15 when he learned, in the most permanent way a person can learn anything, what this machine does to the people it decides are inconvenient. And so a room full of soft words, warm framing, and a lawyer hidden by the window is to William not a family conversation. It is the machine doing the thing the machine does, wearing the face of family to do it. His refusal was not just legal caution. It was almost an instinct, a lifelong allergy to being managed. He was not only protecting his children's future and the line of succession, though he was doing that, he was refusing, on a level far below strategy, to be handled the way he believes his mother was handled. And I think that is the piece the headline can never capture, because it makes William look like the cold one, the man who blew up a family meeting on sight, who would not even sit down. But you have to understand what a room like that represents to him specifically. Diana spent the last years of her life convinced, and not without reason, that she was being managed, that decisions about her, arrangements around her, were being made in rooms she was not fully in, by an institution that had decided how her story was going to go. And her son watched that, absorbed it, and then, at 15, walked behind her coffin while the same institution arranged the choreography of her funeral. So when William, decades later, walks into a warm room designed to gently steer him toward an outcome someone else has already decided on, with a lawyer positioned to record his cooperation, that is not an abstract legal threat to him. It is the oldest and deepest pattern he knows. Wearing a friendly face, his walking out was not coldness. It was the opposite. It was a man who feels these things far too much to sit still inside them. And here is the quiet irony that I keep landing on. The very intimacy of the setting, Windsor, the family framing, come as a son, was meant to reach the sentimental part of him and disarm it. But it reached a completely different part of him instead. Instead of thinking family, he thought machine. Instead of relaxing, he went rigid. The warmth designed to lower his guard is the exact thing that raised it. Because warmth deployed to manage him is the specific trigger his whole life has trained him to distrust. They aimed at his heart and hit his memory. And his memory said leave. So walk back through what actually happened in those 60 seconds. Now that you understand the stakes. The room is set. The framing is warm. Charles is there, hoping this finally settles the thing that has been keeping him awake. Camilla is there, hoping the wall gets built while there is still time. The lawyer is there, positioned, ready to witness whatever consensus the afternoon produces. And in walks the one variable the whole plan required and could not control, William. And the entire architecture depended on him not noticing what the room actually was, on him sitting down, relaxing into the family framing, and letting the afternoon carry him towards something that felt like agreement. And instead, he noticed in one glance the lawyer by the window was the tell, and he read it instantly, and the entire months-long structure collapsed the second he decided not to take his seat. Everything they had built required his participation, and participation was the one thing he simply declined to give. And what he did next is the part I find genuinely masterful, because it is so restrained. He did not make a scene. He did not accuse anyone in front of the room, which would have handed them a grievance, a story about William being paranoid and combative. He did not give the lawyer anything to witness at all. He simply, quietly, ended it. The summit is not proceeding, and he left. Think about what that leaves behind. It leaves Charles and Camilla and a solicitor standing in a room that was built for one purpose, now suddenly purposeless. No confrontation to point to. No outburst to leak. Just an empty afternoon and the dawning understanding that he had seen straight through it. You cannot fight a man who refuses to give you a fight. He denied them the argument as completely as he denied them the agreement. And someone asked me after my last video a question that fits perfectly here. They asked why these royal power struggles so rarely produce an actual blow-up, a shouting match, a scene we can all point to. And this is exactly why, because the people who are genuinely good at power in this family have learned that the scene is the trap. A confrontation gives your opponent something to work with, a version of events, a grievance, a leak, a story where you are the aggressor. The truly dangerous move is the one that leaves no story at all. William walking out without a word gave the other side nothing to hold. There is no juicy quote, no slammed door caught on a phone, no witness to a William who lost it, just an absence, a meeting that quietly did not happen, and an absence is almost impossible to weaponize. You cannot leak silence. You cannot build a narrative around a man who was perfectly, maddeningly calm and simply declined. That restraint is not weakness in this world. It is the sharpest blade there is. Notice too what his silence protected. If he had exploded at Camilla in front of the room, he would have handed her side the perfect counterstory. Poor Camilla, ambushed by an aggressive stepson, humiliated in front of the family, William the bully. Overnight, the victim and the aggressor swap places, and suddenly the sympathy flows the wrong way. By saying almost nothing, William denied them that reversal completely. He kept himself the man who calmly refused the trap, rather than becoming the man who caused the scene. In a family where the story is everything, he protected the story by refusing to give it a dramatic middle. That is not instinct. That is discipline of a very high order. There was, by accounts, a private conversation afterward. William and Charles, no advisors, the version of these things that actually matters, and it was quieter than you would expect, and sadder, because Charles reportedly did not deny what the summit was. He could not really. What he did instead was make the case as a father that he was trying to protect someone he loved, that he was not plotting against his son, that he only wanted certainty for Camilla before it was too late. And William, by these accounts, did not rage at him either. He said something closer to the truth of it, that he understood the fear, that he was not without sympathy for it, but that you do not build certainty by engineering a room. That if there was a genuine conversation to be had about Camilla's future, it could be had openly, honestly, with everyone knowing exactly what was on the table, and no lawyer hidden by the window pretending to be a guest. What he would not accept was being maneuvered. The problem was never the subject. The problem was the ambush. And there is a line from that conversation that, by accounts, cut deepest, because William reportedly turned his father's own logic back on him. He is said to have asked Charles something like, if this arrangement is fair, if it is reasonable, if it is the right thing, then why did it need a hidden lawyer and a disguised room to happen? Why could it not survive being asked openly? And that is the question there is no good answer to, because a genuinely fair proposal does not need to be smuggled in behind a family lunch. You only hide the things that would not survive the daylight. The very secrecy of the method was a confession about the substance. And I suspect that landed hard on Charles, because Charles is not a stupid man, and some part of him surely knew, walking into that summit, that if the plan had been clean, he would not have needed to keep the lawyer off the list. The method gave away that even they did not quite believe the answer would be yes if they simply asked. And here is the thing that makes it genuinely sad, rather than just tactical. I do not think Charles enjoyed any of it. By these accounts, he was not a schemer relishing a clever plan. He was a cornered husband who had let his wife's fear and his own talk him into a method that was not really him, and getting caught at it by his own son. Having the whole disguised structure exposed in one glance and quietly refused, I think that shamed him more than any argument could have, because it was not just a failed plan, it was his son seeing him try to pull something and choosing, mercifully, not to say so out loud. Sometimes the kindest thing and the most devastating thing are the same act. William not naming it to his face was both. And here is a detail that tells you William was not just being defensive, he was setting a precedent. Because after this, according to those close to the household, he made something quietly clear, that any meeting presented as a family conversation would from now on be exactly that. And that legal representation attending in any capacity would have to be disclosed to everyone in advance. In writing, In one move, he closed the loophole the entire summit had been built to exploit. He did not just win the day, he made sure the tactic could never be used on him again. The warm, informal room with the lawyer quietly in the corner. That door is shut now, and that is the real punishment, if you want to call it that. Not a public humiliation, a permanent structural change that quietly strips Camilla's side of the one method that might have worked. Princess Anne, by some accounts, understood exactly what had happened faster than anyone, and reportedly said as much in that blunt way of hers, that a lawyer at a family meeting was never an accident and William had been right to walk. And I think Anne's rid matters enormously, because Anne is the family's great institutionalist, the one who cares most about doing things properly. For her to side with the walkout tells you this was not seen internally as William being difficult. It was seen by the person most devoted to the correct way of doing things as the correct thing to do. When the family's own guardian of protocol says you were right to refuse the room was wrong. And there is a deeper reason Anne would have seen it so clearly. It is worth drawing out because it explains why she and William keep landing on the same side in these stories. Anne's entire life is built on the principle that the institution has rules, and the rules exist for a reason, that you do not bend the process to get the outcome you want. Because the day you do, the process stops protecting anyone, and what the summit represented was precisely a bending of the process, dressing a legal negotiation up as a family chat to get around the fact that the proper, open version of that negotiation would fail. It is corrosive. It is exactly the kind of shortcut that, once tolerated, eats the institution from the inside. So her siding with William was not loyalty to William. It was loyalty to the idea that things must be done properly. And the summit, whatever its emotional justification, was not proper. When the person who cares least about winning and most about the rules tells you the rules were broken, you can take that to the bank. Anne's involvement did something else too. It gave William cover. Because on his own, a future king refusing a meeting his father arranged could be spun as a power grab, a son flexing against a weakened dad. But with Anne, respected, neutral, nobody's partisan, quietly affirming that he had read the room correctly, the interpretation locks in the other way. It becomes not William being difficult, but William being right, confirmed by the one person with no reason to flatter him. In a family where perception is everything, having an ally's read of events is worth more than any argument you could make yourself. Of course, it did not stay inside Windsor's walls, because these things never do. Within days, word that a planned family summit had been abruptly cancelled began to move. Not the full story, never the full story, but enough. Enough for the commentators to start asking why a carefully arranged meeting of the most senior royals had simply evaporated at the last moment. And the palace did what the palace always does. It said nothing specific, confirmed nothing, denied nothing, and let the silence fill with speculation. And one image did the work that no statement could. Reportedly, photographs of the cars leaving Windsor early, far earlier than a full summit would have run. A convoy departing an afternoon that was supposed to last for hours, an empty schedule where a resolution was meant to be. You cannot photograph a plan that collapsed, but you can photograph the cars leaving before lunch. And people who understood the family understood exactly what an early departure meant. Watch how the palace handled the vacuum, because it is a small masterclass in damage control by omission. There was no denial that a meeting had been planned. No confirmation that it had been cancelled, no explanation of why, just a smooth, practiced nothing, the institutional equivalent of a closed face. And that nothing is deliberate, because the palace understands something about the public. That we will always fill a silence with a story, and a vague story we invent ourselves is far less damaging than a specific true one they would have to confirm. So they gave the press an empty space and let everyone paint their own version. A scheduling clash, a health flare-up, a minor disagreement, anything but the real shape of it, which was a future king catching his father's household trying to corner him. The blandness was the strategy. When the truth is a family trying to trap its own heir, no comment is the kindest sentence available. But here is what the silence could not fully hide. and I think this is why the story had legs. Everyone could feel the mismatch between the scale of the preparation and the abruptness of the end. You do not spend months arranging a summit of the most senior royals for it to evaporate over a scheduling clash. The effort that went in was too big for the excuses that came out. And that gap between how much this clearly mattered and how little anyone would say is exactly the space where speculation breeds. The palace could stop anyone from confirming what happened. It could not stop everyone from sensing that something had. So let me tell you where this leaves everyone, because the aftermath is quieter and more consequential than the drama. Camilla's continuity plan, the wall she was trying to build while there was still time, is not just delayed, it is exposed. William now knows exactly what her side was reaching for and exactly how they tried to get it, which means every future approach will be met by a man who has seen the playbook. The soft route is dead. The summit route is dead. What is left for Camilla is the one path she feared most, having to simply trust in William's goodwill after Charles is gone. The exact vulnerability the whole summit existed to avoid. Charles is left holding a failure he cannot really talk about. A last attempt to protect his wife that did not just fail, but revealed itself, and William is left more firmly in control than before, having demonstrated, without raising his voice, that the future belongs to him and cannot be pre-written by anyone, no matter how carefully the room is arranged. I want to be fair about the cost of that, because there is one, and it is the thing I genuinely cannot fully resolve. By refusing the room, William also refused the conversation, and there is a real human conversation buried inside all of this. That maybe does need to happen, because Camilla's fear is not fake. Charles's wish to protect his wife is not unreasonable. What becomes of a widowed queen consort when the reign ends is a genuine question, and a decent family would want to answer it kindly rather than leave it to the cold mercy of whatever mood the new king is in. So when William walked out, he did not just defeat a trap. He also, arguably, slammed the door on the honest version of the same discussion. The one where everyone sits down, no lawyer hidden, and actually works out how to treat Charles's widow with dignity. And the tragedy is that the trap may have poisoned the well for the honest conversation too. Now that William associates the whole subject with an ambush, how does anyone ever raise it again in good faith? Camilla's people, by trying to force the answer, may have made the fair answer harder to reach. That is the quiet damage under the drama. And that is what I keep circling, honestly. Both things are true at once. William was right to refuse to be managed, and the thing they were clumsily, wrongly trying to manage was a real problem that still has not been solved. He won the day cleanly, but the underlying question, what happens to Camilla when Charles is gone, is exactly as unanswered now as it was before the summit was ever arranged. All the summit did was prove it could not be answered by force. It did not get anyone closer to answering it by trust, and trust between these two is the one currency that has been in short supply for 20 years. And here is the thought that I keep turning over, the one that stays with me. Everyone walked into that Windsor Summit believing the meeting was the event. It was not. The event was William noticing a lawyer by a window and choosing, in 1 second, not to sit down. The most decisive thing that happened that day was a thing that did not happen. A meeting that never took place, an agreement that was never reached, a signature that was never even asked for, because the man who would have had to give it walked out first. In this family, the loudest moves are almost never the real ones. The real one was silence and a closed door and a future king who has learned to read a room the way his great relatives once read a folder. And if you want the single lesson buried in all of this, it is that one. In this family, power has almost nothing to do with volume. The loudest person in the room is rarely the one who wins it. The winner is the one who noticed before anyone else what the room was actually for, and had the nerve to walk out of it before it could close around him.